Okay, well, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Jill Key, and I've been working with invasive species and biosecurity for many years, particularly on small islands. And I'm going to give a presentation on strengthening biosecurity on the islands of Tristan da Cunha. Tristan da Cunha is one of the UK overseas territories. There are 16, 6 in the Atlantic, 6 in the Caribbean, 2 in the Mediterranean, 1 in the Indian Ocean, and 1 in the Pacific. Now, amongst them, these overseas territories are responsible for over 94% of the UK's unique biodiversity, either because they're small islands, which tend to evolve small, unique populations of very special species, or because they host very large numbers of breeding seabirds and marine mammals. Now, invasive species, which are non-native species that can cause harm, threaten all the overseas territories. They threaten biodiversity in the environment, bird diseases, or the breeding seabirds, rats. They also threaten agricultural production and livestock, that's crop pests, animal diseases, and public health. And a classic for that would be things like fire ants. And collectively, there is a lack of capacity in the overseas territories to address these issues. They are small places, they have small populations, and there's a lack of contact, training, confidence, and knowledge of exactly what to do. Now, to address these problems, the GB Non-Native Species Secretariat secured £1.25 million from the UK government for the Overseas Territories Biosecurity Project, and this ran from 2016 to 2020. It did continue over the pandemic, but at a much lower level. And the aim of this project was to improve the biosecurity of the overseas territories by building capacity. And bearing in mind that 1.26 million sounds a lot of money, it's over 4 years and 16 territories. That's less than £20,000 per territory per year. Now, there's a couple of links here. The Overseas Territories Biosecurity Project can be found on the top link, and details of some of the toolkits that we developed can be found in the second link. Now, this presentation is specifically about some technical support provided to Tristan da Cunha, and that happened from January to April 2022, so just coming into the late stages of the pandemic. Tristan is a South Atlantic territory and consists of 4 islands: Tristan itself, Inaccessible, Nightingale, and Gough. Now, some important features about the Tristan group: there is no airport. So everything has to arrive by ship. There are 3 main supply vessels that aim to visit 8 to 9 times a year, and a 4th vessel that visits once a year. It's 1,700 miles from Cape Town, so these voyages take around a week, and it can be a lot longer if the seas are rough. This is the South Atlantic Sea, so on many occasions there are delays. The total population of Tristan is 241, so that's not very many people. And Tristan is known for huge numbers of breeding seabirds, marine mammals, and quite a lot of unique endemic species that occur nowhere else. There's 7 land birds and at least 50 plants, 50 invertebrates, and probably about that marine species. So biologically, very important area. Tristan main island is where the people live. It's known as the remotest community in the world. It's a central active volcanic peak with these huge towering cliffs of about 800 meters. And then there is a settlement plain on the north of the island, 1/2 mile wide and a couple of miles long. You can see here the main settlement, known as Edinburgh of the Seven Seas. This is where everybody lives. And then about a mile or so around the settlement plain are the potato patches, which is the main agricultural area, and potatoes is the main subsistence crop. And the other grassy areas are for grazing cattle and sheep. And the main economic mainstay of Tristan is the commercial fishing of the endemic Tristan rock lobster. Gough and Inaccessible Islands are both World Heritage Sites. Gough is home to more than 8 million breeding seabirds. There's at least 24 different species. The main photograph here shows Gough. It has got a South African operated weather station, and at some point in the past, the house mouse was introduced, which has evolved, become larger, and attacks nesting seabirds, and is causing the decline of several species. And there was a huge £30 million mass eradication project implemented in 2021. Unfortunately, tragically, there have proved to be surviving house mice, so that is currently under review. The inset photograph shows Inaccessible Island from Tristan, where it is, for very good reasons, known as the Sleeping Hippo. Nightingale Island is interesting. It's visited by Tristan Islanders. It's an hour or so by small boat. There are a number of small chalets. So for many years, Tristalians have been coming to and from Nightingale. There is a history of harvesting mutton birds, which are shearwaters, every year, eggs and chicks. And it's home to 3 endemic land birds, the small-billed and Wilkins buntings, and the Tristan thrush. Now, there are increasing introductions of non-native species to Tristan over the years. The graph shows the numbers of first records of species from 1793 to 207. This data is taken from the 2007 Field Guide, and you can see how numbers have increased and are increasing as the years go by. Data on invertebrates is actually very poor, and if that was available, then I think we'd see a massive increase in introductions on this graph, and particularly in the most recent decades. The main pathways of introduction in the past have been through live plants being brought in with pests and containing soil, fresh produce, again with pests, live animals, rams and bulls and pet dogs are currently introduced. In the past, there have been further introductions, not as well regulated as they are now. Vehicles, tyres and general cargo can carry stowaways, and vessels can carry marine species in ballast water and hull fouling. The mosquito shown here was first spotted literally 2 or 3 years ago, the first biting mosquito on the island, as an example of a stowaway species that is currently arriving. There are a number of pluses to biosecurity on Tristan. Obviously, all imports come through Cape Town. It's a bottleneck. It's a very easy place to capture things that are being processed and packed and loaded and transshipped for Tristan. So a very good opportunity there. Tiny community, so there's very good general awareness. A new biosecurity officer was appointed in 2021, and new legislation, the Biosecurity Ordinance, was enacted in 2022. A lot of new equipment has been provided, and this was in anticipation of the Gough mouse eradication project to support the chain from Tristan through to Gough Island. UK government funded about £40,000 worth of biosecurity equipment in 2021, and a further £60,000 worth in 2022. And Gough Island has its own biosecurity protocol. So the aims of the technical support visit, we're working with Julian Repetta, who is the new biosecurity officer, who is shown here, to strengthen biosecurity by helping to build capacity, his own and on the island in general, to establish a biosecurity facility to house all this lovely new equipment, and to improve the baseline on existing species. Biosecurity are the measures put in place to reduce the risk of new species arriving. And of course, you need to know what is already present in order to be able to detect new species, to know that they are new. The reality is not as comfortable as you might expect. A 3-month visit, actually only 40 days were spent on the island. It's less than half of the entire trip was actually on the island. The rest was getting there and getting back with delays of COVID, the ship, the rough seas. Nothing is actually in place yet. And the biosecurity facility, which was expected to be already present as an empty building, actually looked like this. There's the vessel I arrived on. They had built the concrete base, but for all sorts of logistical reasons and capacity reasons, they had not been able to assemble the building. So over the time that I was there, the building was being slowly built, and these are the various stages. We were lucky to have some good weather to allow it to happen. And on my departure, the building is standing still with no floors or ceilings, power or water, but substantially there. It's important to note the cultural context to biosecurity in Tristan. The plus side, agriculture is very important, so people worry about pests. The potato patches is the main agricultural production. But of course, that means there are different priorities. Because shipping is uncertain, ships can arrive, not be able to unload imported foods and go away again. There can be months with no imports. People rely very heavily on their subsistence agriculture. They live a crofting lifestyle. And that means that that is always their top priority, the food security. So if it's autumn, as it was during my visit, the most important thing is to get the potato harvest in, to prepare the fields for potatoes, to cull the surplus livestock ready for the winter lack of feed. And so other things such as biosecurity training, such as having hands available to build a building, inevitably have to be second on the line. There's not very many pest species there, but huge numbers of the ones that are there, which is also a problem to the islanders, of course. So the achievements, not trying to set up a full biosecurity program, not trying to run, but to make the first steps and to make simple, achievable steps that Julian, on his own and unsupported, is able to go ahead with and do. So identifying the pinch points of when cargo is landed and when cargo is brought up and put into store, what are the highest risks? Identifying the main points on the biosecurity continuum of how risk goods are brought in and how they are handled. We were able to unpack and set up some of the equipment, for example, the digital microscopes. So we could do training into how to take photographs for identification, identifying some high risk goods, such as, for example, potting soil with organic compost in, very high risk for the chances of new species coming in on that. A simple database for interceptions, and some simple and very realistic protocols that Julian and other Tristanians working in pest control and biosecurity are able to follow. Now, for biosecurity actions, obviously pre-border is the most important element of Tristan's biosecurity. Stop things before they get to the island, and that means in Cape Town. And a Cape Town-based biosecurity officer is being recruited, so that's something in hand, and we're able to contribute to the terms of reference for that position and to help set up everything ready for the recruitment. Border biosecurity, things like imported vehicles, and you can see here a photograph of an imported vehicle arriving. We've now got an inspection protocol with training and implementation of inspection of all imported vehicles when they land. You can see another photograph of imported fruit in the island shop that's been put out for sale. So we have an inspection protocol now for this imported fruit, and the island shop are also trained and alerted to spot anything when they're putting things out all ready for sale. Agriculture department obviously have a very important role to play, and particularly with post-border, because they might be the first people to stop a new pest. So training was done with the agricultural team and some equipment given to them to help them identify anything they found. With Julian, we set up some post-border monitoring devices for invertebrates and some simple survey protocols when Julian is out his normal conservation tasks. And you can see here a photograph of him going up the path on Nightingale to monitor albatross chicks. And you can see that there's dock, imported dock, a weed on this path. He's very aware of what is already present, so is able to keep alert to any new species. And post-border is already pretty good. It's a very aware community. Somebody bought a young praying mantis in a jam jar to us within a few days that they had found just after the ship was unloading cargo, a hitchhiker on cargo, and a cockroach was also found by the store in imported bananas. So people are aware, they are finding things. The bad news is the things are arriving. The good news is they're being spotted. Improved baseline, I was able to make a collection of at least 47 different species to bring back to the UK for identification. At least 3 of these were species we had previously flagged as not being present, and that included the European earwig. And to put some important names on things, the mosquito that was first spotted a few years ago Nobody knew the species, so we're able to confirm it's a type of culex. It does not vector malaria or dengue. I was able to collect both adults and larvae, and using this pop-up breeding cage to hatch through some larvae to confirm that it was a single species of mosquito, and collect a range of agricultural pests so that we can advise on integrated pest management. The Steatoda nobilis is the false widow spider, the smiling skull spider you can see in that little tube. We didn't know that that was already on the island. And the gecko that arrived about 10 years ago is the marbled leaf-toe gecko, Afrogecko porphyrius. We didn't know these names before. So challenges for strengthening the biosecurity down the line. It takes a lot of effort to change existing practices. Something known as cultural inertia. Julian Repetto is on his own there, delivering biosecurity essentially. There's a lot of pressure on him. And without somebody at his side to help give him that support, it is quite difficult. He has got other priorities. He has got to secure his food, build his house, get on with his life. So balancing all these different priorities is always going to be a challenge for him. Remoteness and communication is a challenge. Internet is very poor on the island. It's only available in houses in the evening, only available in the offices during the day. Julian hasn't got a desk, hasn't got an office. He now has a laptop computer, and he will have internet when the biosecurity facility has been completed. But at the moment, of course, he's struggling simply to communicate with the world, to send photos out to say, what is this? It's absolutely critical to recruit the right person for the Cape Town post, so we have high hopes for that. And of course, life in Tristan is challenging anyway. This photo shows the harbour. It's not a very good harbour, it's in the wrong location, and for many days of the year, the high waves and the swell makes access impossible. Islanders can't leave, ships can't offload cargo, so there are many challenges to living in Tristan anyway. So what happens next? Well, the GB Non-Native Species Secretariat will continue to provide support on implementing the protocols that we've set up for border and post-border. There will be help available when the new Cape Town officer becomes effective in training and support. And of course, further down the line, there's gaps. This is not the full biosecurity programme, it's just the first steps. Inter-island biosecurity needs more strengthening, rapid response plans need writing. These are just two examples. But the first steps have been made. They are good steps, and Tristan is well on its way to strengthening its biosecurity. So thank you for listening.